and I was standing what I believe was the one of the strategy rooms of heaven, and before me was a table, and on that table had a map. And as I approached the table, I was just walking up, looking down at the map, and it was like it looked like the world, but it just areas were highlighted on it. And then all of a sudden, as I just looked, I moved again in the spirit, and I was standing in a small village in a desert town, and the village was just riddled with like rocket mortars and bullet holes, and just intense fighting you could tell had been there. And probably about 25 yards away from me was a man, and he was standing there with his AK-47 in his hand. He had the that head wrap, the black and white head wrap that you see a lot of the fighters over in the Middle East wear. And he was just leaning up against a wall that looked like it had been blown out. It could have been a house, but it could have been a wall. And as I approached him, I just felt the urging of the Holy Spirit to pray for him. So I walked up behind him and laid my hands on his back and just began to bless him, and that his heart would just be open, and love and wisdom and understanding would just envelop him. And all of a sudden he stood upright from the leaning position and turned, and I don't know if he could see me, but he said in Arabic, "I'm going home." And he laid down his rifle and he began to walk away. And right before I moved again in the spirit, I heard the word Saudi Arabia. And right as that came to me, I moved again in the spirit, and I was in a white room full of computers, and there were 4 men inside this room, and on the far end was a glass window, and on the other side of the window was all this like high-tech equipment. And above the window was a sign, and it was written in what I now know is Korean, and it said, "Warning, radiation," above the window. And all of a sudden I knew I was standing in a nuclear reactor monitoring room. And as I'm standing there, just looking around and watching these men work, I asked the Father, I go, "If this is real, show me something that I can take back, and I know that this experience is real." And in the middle of the room, I know there was a laboratory table, and on that table was a clipboard, and I took a step or two towards it, and I saw a set of numbers on the clipboard, and it was 51412, and I said them out loud to myself several times because I wanted to remember these numbers. I felt there was importance there. And as I began to look up, I was scanning the room again, and I looked behind me, and there was a door, and I just felt a very big impression to go and anoint the doorposts and the threshold and the head part of the door. And when I did, I went over and I anointed it, I prayed for it. I just had this overwhelming sense of what was going to be coming through that door was going to pass over. It no longer had authority to come into this room. And all of a sudden I was back in my car again, driving, and I quickly put into Google, what is 51412? And 51412 is a number for a reactor coil built in 1978. And because I had heard several weeks before that the report that in North Korea, the technology that they're using in their reactors is our technology from that era, from that era, late 70s, early 80s. And I was just completely and totally blown away by this. It just, I mean, it made the encounter so real, but I felt there was an invitation to begin to pray and pray for Saudi Arabia and North Korea. And shortly after that, I heard that the president's trip, that his first global trip, his first stop was going to be Saudi Arabia. And so it was just, yeah, sharing that with Anna, it was just really, we were all encouraged by it, and she had shared it with our council. And yeah, to this day, every day I continue to pray for those two places, because I believe just something amazing is going to come out of it. And I mean, the economic stuff that came out of the president's trip to Saudi Arabia, you know, even though that there could be, you know, people and politically, but there was, you know, several billion-dollar deals that were signed over there during those weeks after and stuff. So yeah, that's what happened.
Miss Kristen, your turn. And I'm going to tell you, when Kristen went into this, kind of a new experience for me, when Kristen went into this vision, I got sucked into it. And so as she's talking, I'm seeing right along going, yeah, it was quite a trip, but I just felt like I'd been drawn through a vacuum when she started speaking.
So, yeah, was it last Tuesday or the Tuesday before? It was just a couple of days, into June, and we were having our Northwest hangout with Mike and Anna, and I always try to take a few minutes to prepare my heart and ask the Lord what's on his. And so I went up to have a look-see, and I saw a very large vehicle over the Pacific Ocean off the coast coming in, and then I saw like the door open. I saw things coming out of it, and check, okay, what is this? And as I shared it with Mike and Anna, we just go, oh, this is an enemy, and he's coming. Oh, that's right, it was D-Day. That's the reason why. I have had encounters on D-Day, and so this was on D-Day that this happened, which I knew that there was things that were correlated with that, and so we went ahead and moved into it. And then I saw 4 flags that were stationed on the 4 corners of this particular vehicle. And then I shared with Anna, I go, feels like something's coming from China, from Asia. Something is linked in there. So we engaged it to an extent to see, and went over and stood. Well, Anna will tell that when she stood over in the beach in Normandy. But I have another little highlight that's really kind of interesting from that. So that was on D-Day, which was Tuesday. And not 4 days later, it was really interesting and just very sporadic. I got invited to a World War II reenactment, and all of a sudden, by the end of the day, I'm up sitting in the cockpit of a P-38 plane, which is really interesting because it took out global enemies in that day and age. So that's my story.
So for me, my heritage is very, very German, even though I was born in America. This will explain a lot to Mike. But anyway, I'm all German and 1/8 Swede. So very stubborn culture, very determined culture. And I'm all of a sudden I'm standing on the beach of Normandy, and my father my parents had me late in life. My father was there in D-Day and blown off a tank. And I'm looking around thinking, wait a minute, we've gone from the Northwest to Europe, and who was involved in the invasion to stop the enemy? And it was Europe. It was England and us and major players, France, and yes, Russia and Austria, but I'm like, wait a minute, this is bigger than the Northwest. And so to me, the prophetic word was, the word from Ben said, yes, it will be passed over, but I think his initial word leaves us with, it's up to us to do the work, because the vision would not have gone on. And that's when we felt like it should go global and draw representatives in. And the fact that you're here, if you're not comfortable speaking because you're new to this, is great. The fact that you're a representative here is what's important. So I guess the two questions that I have, and this is where seeking the Lord comes in, is what should we do, and what wisdom do you have with regards to this? And so if it was the Council for Northwest Ecclesia, we would spend a little time quiet right now and then share what the Lord has impressed upon us. So I'm going to mute my mic and encourage you guys to feel free to speak on what Holy Spirit's saying to you.
So before our session this morning, I took some time and just, tried to set my heart on maybe what the intention of the Father was. And I use Google Earth because it helps me see. And so I looked up what the, because I say, okay, what does North Korea look like? You know, it's on the other side of the world, and you know, I know it's somewhere near China and Japan. So I went and started looking at the borders, and I just started sensing a deep love for North Korea. You know, it's like, okay, this is our enemy right now. This is the one that, you know, the whole world's saying is out of control. But I just started sensing a really deep love for them. So I just started saying, Lord, I agree with your love for North Korea. And it kind of, I don't know, it's almost like they're driven by fear, I sense. You know, even though he tries to act like a big, tough kid, you know, I'm going to, you know, destroy the world. You know, I sense that it's out of fear, or, you know, resentment or whatever. I don't know what's with China. But Ryan Song is the residence where Kim Jong-un lives, and it's a very large complex. And so you can go right over it in Google Earth and see it. And I just started, you know, bathing that area with love. So I would say that love, you know, needs to be a big part of this. That love is released, the love of God, which, you know, is the devastator of fear. You know, it decimates fear and gives opportunity for people to then see the real love of God.
So that speaks to me of the chancellor's house and the tools that you know, the weapons that are in there, you know, love bombs, you know, joy hand grenades, etc. That's just a thought. I'm just placing that there. Okay, so here I go. I have a sense that the Lord's been saying something to you, Catherine. What is going with you? And Mike, great, that was wonderful.
Okay, couple of different things. I just heard, if America falls, all nations will fall. And that's just something that has been, I've heard that statement many times in the news and what have you. But a couple of weeks ago, the bench of the Spine of the Nation that I'm a member of had an encounter. And we were in the White House, in the Oval Office. And the three of us went in, and Donald Trump was sitting at his desk, and he says, "What are you guys doing here?" And we said, "We have come to unplug you." And so one of the members was at the door, and then I and the other person, the third person, was on each side of him. And he says, "What do you mean unplug me?" And so we began to explain to him what some of the world systems that have influenced his decisions and the pressure that is on him as president. And so as I looked at him, I saw him with like a helmet, some kind with electrodes in it, over his cranium, over his brain. And then I took it and I went behind him, and I saw plugs attached to his spine. And somebody said, "Well, that's like the Matrix," and I had not ever seen that movie. And so we asked him if he would allow us to unplug him, and he said yes. And so we did that, and then there was a knock at the door, and it was Vice President Mike Pence. And he goes, "What are you guys doing in here, having a party?" And Trump says, "Yeah, come on in." So we asked Michael if we could do the same thing. We ended up having 12 cabinet members within the Oval Office unplugging him, and I believe it's Freemasonry and some of the other control systems that are established in the U.S. And then as we were finished, they all thanked us and we left. And so when I look at him, a lot of people call him a renegade, and but I understand why he is like that, because of the resistance to the pressure of the system, the world system. And anyway, that was very interesting. Never have done anything like that before. They were all very appreciative and very grateful that we were there and thanked us. And then we left. And one other thing that I want to bring up is that we are in a June equinox, and June 21st is the longest day. Well, I watch a fellow who follows earthquakes, and he says usually during the winter and summer equinox, there is a high level of deep earthquakes, consistently deep, 6s and 7s. And I'm not sure what all that means, but I thought it was significant. It resonated with me anyway. So I wanted to just throw that out.
We had a conversation about that last night at council. We're also in the age of Aquarius, which is the water bearer. And we believe this is part of, Mike would call it deconstruction. And the middle of the year, there's a new season, which, I mean, tomorrow is the middle of the year. So sometime in the next 2-3 months, we're going to see a transition in the move of God. I believe we're going from individual manifestations to literally the first stages of heaven on earth literally staying. That's personal opinion. But so here we have a shaking up and the carrying of the Holy Spirit around the world. But anyway, Ben, I'm going to pick on you. I think there's something else in you.
I'm sure there is, but as of right now, I'm not really getting anything at all. I feel just impressed upon just to listen for right now. So I don't doubt it, but just not right now.
Okay. Anybody else have any words of wisdom? Any revelation?
I got a vision. I saw D-Day with all the soldiers in the flat barge and the bodies in the sea and all the killing. And I heard never again, never again. And I said, all right, what is it about? And D-Day liberated France, but it was the end of the war. It means all Europe was liberated by France being freed. It started in France and it went all the way into Europe. And then I said, all right, what else? And then I saw my father and he said, never again anymore. My father was in the French resistance during the war. He was 18 at the beginning of the war. And he was captured and was sent to Germany in prisoners' camp. And he said it again and again, never again anymore. And I just had this huge sense that war and what happened, that will never happen again. God is not going to let that happen anymore at all. It's like a promise that we won't see this kind of horror anymore.
So my pondering is the Lord saying, with the work we do today, we will not see these kinds of spiritual attacks anymore? Is this a word, a representation of the changing season, and we won't see the kind of spiritual attacks we've seen from the demonic? Just a question.
I think it's far more a promise that it will not happen in the natural. I do go to France a lot, and I'm not at all like you, who are seeing so much in the spirit. I will say, a bit of a baby in that. And despite over 2 years with Mike and his brilliant teaching, and translating his blog into French, which allows me to go really deep in it, the wisdom has increased. I can see it. Everybody says it around me. I can't see much in the spirit, but the one thing I know is that there is a canopy of operation over France. I know that it is from the fact that the French people decapitated their king. And when that happened, they took the head of the king and spread the blood of everybody around. And the French people say, we accept the responsibility. So that's for us and our children. So there's been a covenant with the blood. And we know how important that is. The more I've been maturing in the spirit, the more I can feel that oppression every time I go back to France. And I was there just 2 weeks ago. I spent 10 days, and I was in Nice. And if you remember, there's been a terrorist attack quite last year in July. And I was on the beach, and we were different Christian, and we prayed. And I asked God for a vision and some words, and usually it flows. It really flows. And I had almost nothing. It was like if I was dry, completely dry. I could feel this thing above me stopping me to receive. There is something huge, and I have no idea, what to do. It's not up to me alone, obviously, but I feel that God was making me feel how bad it is, and that it's not going to be in the natural. We can do anything for France. It's going to be in heaven. It's going to have to remove something. I don't know. There is something so thick above France, but it's changing. I can see the church I go to is moving, new blood coming in, new generation seeing more than ever. And I can see the church coming together to fight. I can see the people are going on the Promenade des Anglais where that attack happened, and they talk to people, and they talk about the love of God, the love of Jesus. So I can see there are things being done in the natural, but my sense is that something has to be done in the supernatural, because otherwise that canopy is going to stay there. But I don't have anything else. I know I have a call for France. I have received from Joan of Arc her mantle. I don't know what to do with that. To defend and to protect France. So when you have a baby like me receiving that, it's a bit overwhelming. And I've been asking, and God is saying, just do what you're doing. I said, my heart is with you. I give you my heart. I give you my life. I give you everything. I'm available. Use me. And some people say I don't realize how much I'm doing already by all this translation and all the talking and all the mentoring, it's not really mentoring. I share with people, and we have this Skype discussion, and I encourage them, and I give them more information, and ask them to pray about it for God to make them revelation. But there is something horrible above France. I can feel it. I can see it. Every time I go, it's worse. And there is this constant mourning of the dead and reminiscence of the dead. They can't seem to move on. It's always bolting the stable after the horses has gone, and doing a lot of things, but that's not going to change anything. So I had this huge feeling with that verse in the Bible, let the dead bury the dead. And it's like in France, that's what's happening. They are all burying their dead and they can't see much. So I have this overwhelming emotion for all the French and the Francophile, because Francophonie represents 250 million people in the world. We are not talking only about France, but 52 countries, I think, or I can't remember how many, where French is an official language. All over the world, all around the world. It's like, it's a belt around the world, the Francophonie. And I don't know what to do about being available for God. So when Christine asked me if I would like to join, and I asked God and he said yes. And I said, I have no idea. I'm happy. I'm delighted to join you. And I give you myself, but you have to show me the way, because I don't know what to do.
Can I share one other thing? A couple of days ago, the bench in Washington, D.C., we engaged, and we sometimes are having a difficult time flowing together. And the term destiny malaise came up. And let me just give you a brief definition. The sickness of the heart when a person feels he is missing or has missed the purpose of his life. It is a deep misery of having failed to find his place to contribute life for the work of God. And what we felt the Holy Spirit was asking us to do is to search our hearts and ask Him to show us about this destiny malaise. And so when we came back together on Monday, we felt that it was for the whole body of Christ, that we have fallen into this place where a lot of us that have been in some of the faith movements and Kenneth Hagin and those guys, we're all getting older, but we really haven't stepped into our destiny. And we feel like it that believers are cloaked with this feeling, well, gee, I'm getting older, and what do I have to contribute? And even the younger people don't have really a vision of what their purpose is. And so we are not sure. Me individually, I see that within my own community of people I have connected with for 20 some years. Some have left the church, some are still in the church, but nobody is going anywhere. And so what I did was I went into the court of accusation and repented for myself, because I have certainly felt that a lot, but also for those that I'm connected with here in this area. And I believe that is really also very connected with all the things that have been shared. Because if we don't know our identity and we don't know what our destiny out of God has for us, how are we going to operate in kingdom government if we don't know who we are and what purposes? So, I'm not sure how that all fits in, but I think it does. And that needs to be that cloak of deception. Could be healing. I don't know what you call it, but it's definitely apparent. And I think that maybe that's something that we can legislate over today. I don't know, just see what the Holy Spirit wants to do.
Well, that research shows that, that is a broadcast lie. And also what Laura is saying is a broadcast lie over France. They're stuck in this morning. Research actually shows that most world changers are 60 years old or older. The people who do the greatest effect globally are of retirement age because they're free from raising kids and their careers. And they've done all that and they can focus. And if you ever, I don't know if he's still around, if you ever have a chance to hear a man named Peter Daniels, he really goes into it. And he goes into, with regards to your life and your purpose about thinking big. The bigger you think. But anyway, Paulette, do you have something to say?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you that I can participate in this. This is pretty awesome. Well, what I'm seeing is that Saudi Arabia and even the conflict in the Mideast is a present conflict. And of course, D-Day and World War II was truly a past conflict. But both conflicts have the same outcome, which has to do with a lot of destruction, a lot of trauma, a tremendous amount of mourning. And one of the things that often Alaska is caught in is they cannot let go of the past to embrace the future. And they rehearse all the pains and forget how great their God is. And so they get stuck. And then I look at Korea, who is sitting in the middle at this present time, more or less as a vortex stirring the nations in the area of fear. Because North Korea is a loose cannon, so to speak. But when you go back to the vision that I think it was Ben, he laid his hands on a soldier because the soldier was leaning up against a house, and it appeared that he was pondering his life, so to speak. And he determined to lay down his guns. And he walked away. And the impression was he may have been heading home. D-Day was such an impact that it too had to do with laying down the guns or moving into that place of victory that would affect World War II as a whole. And then you go into that vision of unplugged. And it's like God is so desiring to unplug us from the traumas and the pain of the past in order that we can fully embrace the future that has to go with the equinox that is even taking place today.
And there it is. That's what we see in council. We came around to a synopsis that tied it all together. Now the question is, what do we do? And I have a sense, Mike, we need you. I have a sense the key is the spirit of fear, and doing something against the spirit of fear globally seems like a giant task. So, Mike, words of wisdom?
Okay. I would say in looking at what's going on here, looking in the spirit realm at us gathering and the purpose of the gathering, I could see like arcs of connection that were intersecting and then opening up, the place of authority for us to act in unity. And I think that's why it's so important that there are people here from different places, that we can come together in agreement. And in that agreement, we can begin to then come together to deal with the accusations that each of us have against our own particular areas, whether they be nations or places. Because if their fear operates when you give it a place, what you fear comes upon you. And I feel very clearly that, the visions that have been shown, particularly the Korean issue and the issues around sort of the global fear of destruction or war or those type of things. And I think the vortex of fear is a very good description of it, because basically it stirs things at the center and then it goes further and further out. And if we're going to deal with it, then you have to deal with it in the opposite spirit. I mean, Mike Lindell was absolutely right. Perfect love casts out fear. And so many of the reactions that we have nationally with our national governments basically revolve around action. Most of it revolves around how can we fight? How can we use the power that we have to force things into submission? How can we use our economic power to put sanctions on? How can we use our political power, our military power? Everything revolves around demonstrating power, whereas in the kingdom, we have to demonstrate love. And if we're representing our nations or regions, then we have to look at what are our nations doing to facilitate effectively the reproduction of this fear. Because, the media and within our nations create, in a sense, the news of these things, and then everyone then demands action. And I believe that the action we need to take is to deal with it in the opposite spirit. Therefore, I would suggest that each of us needs to hear the accusations. If we're going to go to the court and deal with it, to give us authority, then we need to know the accusations that we are representing, because we have to agree with them. And we have to actually take a stand, agree with the accusations, get a verdict. And with that verdict, I believe we can use the chancellor's houses, the weapons house, the ordnance house. We can get the ordinances of heaven moved. I think there are legions of angels that I was seeing who are ready to be given the love bombs, the weapons of love that would come in opposite spirit to what the political system would try and do. And I think the unplugging is a really significant thing, because each of us need to be unplugged from our own political systems and our own ideologies that we are representing, because we're coming at the kingdom manifesto, if you like, not a worldly one. And therefore, I believe that if we represent each of our areas, then I think we will then be able to stand in the court and then use the verdict to be able then to deliver that out to the different places. And I think Korea is the one that's centered here. Saudi Arabia is a huge issue when it comes to promoting global terrorism. They are basically the global terrorist center. And the money that they create actually from our trade with them, and this is the problem, the accusations can be made, well, you're giving them the money because you're entering into huge trade deals that they're then using to promote terrorism. And I know Justin Abraham has a major revelation about that whole dynamic and how we need to break agreement with that if we're going to see things change at the root, and where the root is producing this fruit all over the world. So I would suggest that that we actually each find the accusations that we need to stand in identification for. Then we can deal with those identification issues. I mean, how long is that going to take? That's the issue. It's like, how long is this meeting going to last? I can't be here for a huge amount of time because I've got other things afterwards. But perhaps I would suggest that if each of us representing different people groups, representing different language groups, and also including some of the people from we haven't got anyone representing the East here. Jessica isn't here, but in a sense, I think looking at that, perhaps we should then schedule another meeting when we actually just do the legislation, having prepared. And then when we engage the court, if there are other things that come up, that's great. We can receive them, but we will have done the groundwork, which then enables us to get actually stuck right into the situation. And some of the things people have shared, are all part of that. Because the whole issue of fear affects the religious systems. People who are under those systems, they operate in the same basis of fear. I mean, there's so much in terms of the religious system. And then often the religious systems promote judgment, and they promote the same lack of love that the political system does. Because, Jesus warned of two leavens, the leaven of Herod, the political, and the leaven of the Pharisees, the religious. And I think we need to look at the actual accusations that may come towards both of those particular issues, because I don't think the institution of the church has actually done anything different than the political institution. They often work together. And I think we need to see if we're going to come into our inheritance as sons and deal with this malaise, which is essentially, well, what can we do about it? We can't do anything. We're not powerful enough. We're not got any authority in this. Well, we're realizing that we are sons of God seated in heavenly places with authority. Therefore, we need to act and use that authority to come clearly in the opposite spirit. That would be what I would see. And love, it will be the key. We will never solve the terrorist solution or any political thing with vengeance, retribution, anything like that. So, we get bombs in a particular place, or something happens, and what the groundswell that comes from people inspired by that religious and political system is, we want revenge. We want you to deal with something so we want you to bomb these places out of existence, rather than actually we need to find a way of demonstrating love, which is going to change hearts and minds. And I think that's the picture of the guy who was blessed and prayed for, and hands laid on him. The love that was demonstrated to him changed his heart. So he wasn't a political figure. He was one of the people on the ground. And it's the hearts and minds of the people on the ground that can begin to change the political system. Because if they say we're not fighting, then those that demand those things are going to get no success. So I think there's some significant things in the actual vision itself which will help us look to deal with it. And then you have to look at, here's an issue of what are they trying to do? They're trying to get nuclear weapons to cause nuclear devastation, or to create a fear that they can reach Israel, or they can reach Russia, or they can reach the US or the UK. That induces fear. But actually, we were those that dropped the first bombs. We actually created the fear of using those things. And I think there's something worth looking at even in that. When we were looking at in the Northwest once, we did a court case to do with the fires. I don't know if you remember it.
Yes.
And one of that thing linked back to the production of the bomb, which was used in Japan. And there was a link to why there were spreading of fires, and there were a number of things behind it. But one of them was that. And I think some of these issues might be significant in looking at what we have done that has created a world system that actually operates in fear. And using deterrence is actually a fear. I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? I'm going to deter you from fighting me because I've got a big stick as a deterrent. So if you fight me, you're going to get it back big time. And all of that operates in a fear dynamic. And you can look at it in a sense of saying, well, yeah, but that's the world with which we live in. Yeah, but that's why we've got to see it changed. The only way creation is going to change is if sons of God get manifested and seen to operate in the authority of sonship. And I think that would be my view anyway.
Oh, Mike, I think you're right on. That's what I was sensing. I was sensing this picture is too big for this meeting.
Yeah.
Because when you find the accusations, we're going to end up in repentance, and it's several steps before we get to legislation. Mike, I have a sense the Lord has highlighted to you at least one other person who should be invited, and
Jessica Lou. I was just going to say that.
Oh, we
Jessica
invited
has
her.
to be here.
Yeah, we invited her. I don't know why she didn't show up. So yeah, and then I will fill in Anne from Kenya. I think Anne should be on this call. But I think the key is schedule now. So Mike Parsons, when's the next time you have a free Tuesday? Because you do a lot of mentoring on Tuesday mornings.
Let me have a quick look. Tuesday afternoons for me.
Tuesday afternoon.
Well, next week we've got the Northwest Seattle meeting. And then the following week I'm free. So I'm free Tuesday the 4th. That's not so good for you because that's 4th of July.
Well, I'll tell you this. Our guys would jump on this. I mean, if you want a bunch of interlopers, the ecclesia would jump into the middle of this. Zoom will hold up to 50 people. If you tell me, if you want them here, we can do it next week. Or Mike, 4th of July won't work. I cut you off, but when's the...
Yeah, the next one after that for me is the 18th, or use the next week one in the Northwest one and go use that to engage. I'm happy. I mean, it's you. I'm here to facilitate what you want to do. So I'm just here to support. You called this, and I think you got the vision for it, particularly in terms of having received the different visions. I'll do whatever you like. If you'd like to use that next week, because that obviously is the first. It's a week. I think a week to be able to prepare cases for the individuals, people groups, tongues, the different tribes, if you like. And I think that would include Spanish and French and English and Chinese and the other major languages, as well as people groups and everything else. I'm happy to do that if you're happy to do it.
So guys, consensus: Paulette, Jeff, Catherine, Laura, will next Tuesday work for you? Can we meet again?
Same time?
Yeah.
7 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll work for me.
Yay, Catherine, I was a little worried about you because your work schedule. Okay.
That'll work for me.
I wonder if I can still turn this. I may have to send you a new meeting number. I'm wondering if I can turn this into a recurring so you have the same meeting number.
Will you send us the recording of this?
That's
Anna?
the thing.
Anna?
Thank you. Laura, I don't think I have your email, but what I will do is it automatically formats in an MP4. I will upload it onto YouTube as unlisted and send you the link, because I quit typing. Mike's instructions are a bit detailed, and it would almost be better if we went to the end of the recording and listened again. And I'll have it uploaded in 2 hours. So, Laura, if I can, Laura, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a white bubble that says chat. If you will type in your email, and then I think I have everybody else's emails. and it will just actually save to the meeting. Yay. Okay.
So can I close with something? Because you asked me before if I had something, and I said I didn't, and I do now.
5 minutes or 50 cents.
It's not going to be very long. So as Mike was talking, and he talked about the dropping of the bomb, and we started, in an area, we were talking about Normandy a little bit, and the Allied invasion was a group of people coming together, and it was unified. It was done together. When and then later when the Americans dropped the bomb, that was like an act of independence almost. And God showed me as that came up, the spirit of fear was unleashed, because independence draws the spirit of fear, because it says, I'm big, I'm bad, I'm going to intimidate you. And it lined up. It's like I looked down history line and I saw this from when the bomb dropped all the way through the overthrowing of governments, from Iran to the Contra scandal down in South America, to every time that America has removed a dictator, it's based on that point in fear and time. And I feel as if when we come in, I think that's the starting point. It's like D-Day was unification, us stepping out through the Manhattan Project, I know the uranium was manufactured in the state of Washington, and one of the military bases outside of Tri-Cities. But from that, it created that independence, fierce spirit. So I think that's the beginning point, and you can see it weave through time what America has done using that this is what we're capable of doing, and we're going to use it as kind of like a strong arm in a lot of ways. So that's what I got.
Thank you, Ben. So this issue is huge. So I pray angels of light over everyone here. And their skirts will sit as an umbrella over you, so the enemy can neither see or hear you this coming week, which should lessen the possibility of attacks. And with that, I say thank you, Lord, for willing hearts and the faithful. And I bless the Lord and praise him for all of you. So whatever time of day it is for you, thank you for coming, and you are released to leave, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Mike.
See ya.
Everybody's going. So I think the rest of us kind of want to hang and talk for a minute. So
Well, do you want me to take this opportunity to tell you what happened?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, I met with on Sunday night. One of the council members came over for an early kind of get away for him and his wife. So Gay and I went out to dinner with them, and it was really good. But he did have some poignant questions for me, and so as I was telling Kristen, and George and I met yesterday for about an hour before and prayed and engaged, and George and I both repented of some things that had to do with denominational stuff. And so I was kind of a little apprehensive. I was